Well, people are often asking me about Audis. Oh, they're beautiful looking cars. Do they run good? Is it a good car to buy? Well, I'm going to dispel the myth of Audi supremacy with this absolute pile of junk 2011 Audi A4 2.0 four-cylinder turbo that a customer got suckered into buying. The customer was owed money for work he did. Guy wouldn't pay him. Owed him thousands of dollars. But then he says, I got this Audi here and it's worth $14,000. If what I owe you when you give me $7,000, I'll give you the car. So the guy does. First, big mistake right there. Now, he didn't know me at the time, so he took it to various other garages who screwed him over, had him sit for months, and it never ran right, so he towed it over here. Gives me the key, and when I try to start it, when I put in the stupid keyless ignition, nothing happens. There's no lights. So, I'm going to have to jump it. And it's problem number two. We got to jump start the battery. So we open the hood, over we go. We'll open the hood, and guess what? There's no battery under the hood to jump start it. Now the battery's in the trunk, but there's no key and nothing to open the trunk with. Oh, but look, there's a button you push to open the trunk, but the battery's dead, so the trunk won't open. This is a true catch-22. You gotta jump start the battery in the trunk, but the battery's dead, so you can't get into the trunk. Brilliant Audi engineers, they thought of everything to lock you out of your own car. And I got a jump pack, and there's a positive terminal under the hood I can hook it up to. As you look, there it is. Positive, hook that up to the positive. Now we got power to the positive, and we'll put the negative over here on this nice post. That's what it's made for. There, and we'll turn it on. We got 85% battery power left. So let's go back and pray. We push the button, the trunk opens. Success! Aha! Now we can get to the battery. Oh, there's no battery. Oh, there's not even a battery in the car. No wonder it didn't start. Like I said, this baby's been to 2 or 3 different mechanics, didn't know what they're doing, screwing around. So now we'll put a battery in and go from there. Well, at least you can't blame Audi on this one. They do put batteries in when they make them. This is negative ground because it bolts to the frame. And the other side says positive. So that means this one's the negative. We'll hook it up. So we'll put the negative on and tighten it up. 10 millimeter. That's tight. And we'll do the other side. Let's pray I can start it up and pull it in the driveway and figure out what's going on with this clunker. Well, here goes nothing. Well, unfortunately, that's what we got. Nothing. The engine won't even crank. It just clicks. Well, let's check the battery. Now, the customer supplied the battery, so let's see if that's a piece of crap, too. At least it opens the trunk. It's got that much power, so let's hook up the battery tester. Positive to positive, negative to negative, and we'll test it. This particular one has 900 cold cranking amps, so we'll set this for 900 cold cranking amps. So it's 900, and we'll test it and see what happens. It's testing it. Says it doesn't have much. Isn't that typical? So we're gonna try to jump start it. It's supposed to have 900 cold crankings, it's less than 500. So we're gonna jump start it, see if that helps. So we'll get out the big guns. As you can see here, this baby can do 200 amp engine start, which is what we're gonna do. Click, click. So we'll just hook the cables up, positive to positive, negative to negative. But now plenty of power, we'll let it go about 5 minutes with this. Then we'll go back inside, see if the stupid thing will start. Cross our fingers this time. Nothing. Same clicking. It just clicks, but it doesn't start. Which I kind of thought anyways, because even with 500 amps out of the 900, it should have cranked the engine. The engine won't even crank. This is one pile of junk. Now, since all it does is click, either the starter's not working or the engine's locked up. So let's go under and check. So what we're gonna do is get a long extension bar and sockets and see if we can turn the engine over by hand. So we get the socket and we're sticking it on the front of the crank. The crank's right here. And we're going to try to turn it. And what? No, the engine is locked up. So there's no point in going any further. I can't spin the engine because the engine's locked up. Pile of junk. Man, did he get ripped off. Now, I do have to say I was wrong when I called this a rolling pile of junk because it doesn't roll anymore. It's just a pile of junk. So we'll close the trunk for one last time. When you see A4 2.0T, that's 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo engine. Don't walk away, run away from one of those cars. I have never seen a used one that didn't burn oil or have the engine lock up. In this case, the engine's completely locked up. But when I checked the spark plugs, they're coated with oil, so it was burning oil before it blew up. But now it's locked up entirely, and basically, this beautiful looking car, I gotta say, it's black and shiny, nice interior, but it's pretty much worth salvage value. Now, they are marvels of modern engineering when they actually work and run and are zippy with their turbos, but when the engine's locked up, they are just a pile of junk. So goodbye, Audi. I feel sorry for the guy who got it. Somebody owed him thousands of dollars. Then he made my customer pay him thousands on top of that to take this car that's now worth maybe $500 now. This is not unique for Audis. It's actually quite typical for one that's 10 years old. And you might say, Scotty, it's only got 87,000 miles on it. Well, in this case, that's all she wrote for this Audi, with a little bitty 2-liter turbo that the engine said, I think I can. Gee, I guess I can't. But at least now, understand, run away from these cars, especially used. Do not take them as payment for a debt where you have to give people money too. Now, he probably would have never gotten money out of the guy in the first place. So if he would have gotten a car for what was owed, at least it wasn't the insult that he gave him extra money for this rolling, or should I say, stationary piece of junk. Here we have a 2013 Chrysler 200. Making noises, check engine light coming on. We'll find out what's wrong, but first, let's do an overview of Chrysler 200. What went wrong? Now, they only sold them for 7 years. They were competing against things like the Toyota Camry. Now, back in 2013, when this V6 Chrysler 200 was new, it was only about $2,000 cheaper than a V6 Toyota Camry. And if you compared this V6 200 to a 4-cylinder Camry back in the day, the 4-cylinder Camry was only $200 more than this car, which leads me to wonder why anybody would even bought one in the first place. You get the legendary Toyota reliability for $200 more with a 4-cylinder and $2,000 more with a V6. Let's see what's under the hood of this thing. This is calling their world engines. 3.6-liter variable valve timing 6-cylinder engine. There it is. Since Fiat took over Chrysler, there's a lot of Italian design going on in some of these things. Maserati and Ferrari souped some of these up to put out a lot of horsepower. Not exactly known for reliability, Ferrari and Maserati, right? This particular one puts out 283 horsepower. Being a world car, guess where this particular one was made? Well, this engine was made in Mexico. They got 3 plants. 2 are in Michigan and 1's in Mexico. This is the Mexican engine. Again, not a place where high quality is known. But some of these engines, especially these earlier ones, had a problem with the heads and the valve seats and had to be rebuilt. Now, they only made the 200s for 7 years. They suckered a bunch of people in the beginning, but the last year they sold in the United States, 2017, they only sold about 18,000 of them. You can see the sales. Probably as people drove them, the engine didn't work right. They saw they were typical Chrysler, poorly made junk, and they couldn't give the things away. So they stopped making them. When you're competing against greats like Toyota Camry, Honda Accord, it amazes me that they actually sold 700-something thousand of these total in the United States. Well, we'll plug in the old scan tool and see what it says. It says P0520, engine oil pressure sensor circuit. Repair immediately if it runs bad. And it also has engine oil pressure sensor circuit low. Let's pray it's a simple fix. This is the oil pressure sending unit for this car. Now, unfortunately, in this horrible world design, I guess if that's the way the world was going, then the world is in horrible shape. That little sensor isn't big, but it's hiding under here. You got to take the whole top of the engine apart to get to it. Let's compare that to my 94 Celica. Now, it is 19 years older than that car. You can change the oil sending unit on this in 15 minutes. It may be 19 years older. It still has the original one because it's still working. That shows you Toyota quality versus Chrysler crap. Now, as you look under the car, you can see there's no oil dripping. It's not dangerous. If it was leaking, you could get low oil pressure. That's dangerous. If you actually had low oil pressure, of course, that would be dangerous too. But let's start it up here. It's not like the engine has rods knocking. If you actually lost oil pressure, the engine would sound horrible. And this one sounds totally normal for one of these that's got about 90,000 miles on it. So in this case, the only thing that's wrong is the warning system that warns you when the oil pressure has gone too low is broken. So you're gonna have to take this engine apart and spend hundreds of dollars replacing the warning device. Like I say, it's not making noise, it's not leaking, it's not like it's gonna be a problem for the time being, but your check engine light's gonna stay on. Can't get your car inspected if you live where cars inspected. So eventually you'd have to take the engine apart and replace the stupid little poorly made piece of metal and plastic so that the check engine light will go out. But luckily for the owner, this is Clarksville, Tennessee. They don't do that kind of inspection on cars, so he can just merrily drive along this way if he wants. If you don't want to spend a bunch of money taking the engine apart to replace a stupid warning device that is broken. Let's check the OEM enhanced data. Well, it still just shows the stupid one for the oil pressure sensor circuit. So let's look at live data. We're seeing the short-term fuel trim on bank 1 that's subtracting 3.9%, and the short-term fuel trim on bank 2 is subtracting at 0, minus 3.1, minus 3.5 on 1. So it's running a little bit uneven. It's subtracting more fuel on bank 1 than on bank 2. I can feel a little jiggle in the engine, but that's normal with these things. They aren't perfectly made after all. They are made in Mexico. They don't hold up over time like a Toyota engine would. All right, let's do an all module scan. Here we go. It's going through all the modules. As you can see, it goes through an awful lot of stuff. They did load these things with a lot of electronics. And if you know anything about Chryslers, as they age, their electronics tend to go bonkers and have all kinds of wacky problems. But luckily for this, other than the oil pressure sending unit not working right electronically, the only code is B165E, which is the parking lamp control circuit is open. On these electronic monstrosities, even the parking lights are controlled by computers. But in the case of this one, I turned it on, checked them all, they're all working presently, so it's another thing you live with when you have a Chrysler that's starting to age. Now, as I said, they're nice looking cars, they got nice looking interiors and everything. Chrysler was always form over function. As my grandfather always said, he was a mechanic too, Chryslers, they're good looking cars, but they just don't hold up over time. I realized this was long before Mercedes-Benz bought them, and then sold them, and then Fiat bought them, and then Peugeot mixed it all together and calls it Stellantis. As far as I'm concerned, time goes on with Chrysler, quality goes down. And this V6 Pentastar World engine made in Mexico, it's no exception. Look at all the plastic crap on it. The plastic oil pressure sender's now broken. We gotta take all that apart to replace it if we want the light to go out. And look at the overall car. They are nice looking cars. They got style, there's no arguing with that. But in the case of these Chrysler 200s, ultimately, function won over form. They went from selling 170 something thousand to only selling 17,000 the last year. They don't sell them at all anymore. Now originally, when they brought this out, they had that big Super Bowl ad where I believe it was Eminem is riding down Detroit, and they're bragging about, oh, it's American made, blah blah, America, America. They always seem to do that in Super Bowl ads, right? But they picked the 200 and not the Chrysler 300. The 200 is made, or I should say assembled, in Michigan. This engine came from Mexico, but the vehicle was assembled in Michigan. But the 300s at the time were all made in Canada. So they decided, well, we'll show the 200, which is kind of a mistake, because the 300s are at least fast and zippy, and they could hold up a little, but the 200s, whew, they just failed miserably. So I guess I'll put the beauty cover back on. I know what a stupid idea that is. The beauty cover serves no purpose other than to hide the engine. I guess they didn't want people to see all that plastic crap on the engine, so they covered it up with another piece of plastic crap. Here we have an infamous 2015 Ford Focus, and yes, it is the one that has the dual clutch automatic transmission that Ford has to either fix or replace the car. Let's see how this one has held up over time. Now the man's smart. This is his secondary car he bought used. He has a Toyota Corolla that's his regular driver, so he's not putting too many miles on this thing. It's only got 55,949 miles. So it's low mileage. He bought it used. He's just done the usual oil change, brake pads. He hasn't had any real problems because it's low mileage. Now, well, he likes the fact that it gets upper 30s miles per gallon on a highway, but he doesn't like the transmission the way it shifts. Now, it's never stranded him, but that's the problem with those dual clutch transmissions, is you get great gas mileage, but often it's hunting for gears. So it feels weird because if you're at a certain speed, it'll try to go down and up and try to equilibrate to get the best gas mileage versus power. It doesn't like the feel of it. Now, they did have class action suit for a bunch of years. You can look it up. And this one is actually covered, but only for so many years and so many miles. And this one, they wouldn't do anything because it's working as it normally should. It doesn't have a particular problem other than the weird shifting. The thing that people need to understand about these dual clutch transmissions is this. Talk about overkill engineering. It's got a whole fulcrum, and I mean, they really got carried away with this thing, even though it's all plastic. The dual clutch transmission, it's an automatic transmission. You don't shift it, but actually it is, as it said, dual clutch. It's got two clutches in it, like a standard transmission. Instead of you shifting it, the computer uses solenoids to activate the clutches, so it shifts itself. But it's basically an automatic standard transmission. Eventually, the clutches will and do wear out. And when they do, you can't have Billy Bob at the corner gas station putting a new clutch in because the computer has to compensate for wear as it wears out. When it's worn out, you put a new clutch in. The whole thing has to be reprogrammed on a road test with some very high-level Ford scan tools in order to get the new one to shift right. So some of the problems that they've had are because they're not repaired correctly. I've seen this over and over again. Guys will put clutches in, they won't work right, and I said, well, did you reprogram it? And they're like, what do you mean? We put clutches in. I said, well, it's got to be all reprogrammed. Some of the problems are basically because they're so complex technologically and requiring reprogramming that repairs are often done incorrectly, and then they get kind of a bad rap that maybe they didn't actually deserve themselves. Take, for example, some of the people's complaints of later model Toyota automatic transmissions. They'll say, I don't like the way it feels, right? And I say, they're trying to get the best gas mileage out of that setup. So it does feel weird at certain speeds when you're kind of in between. Is it going to third gear, fourth gear? What's it doing? And people don't like that feel. The Toyotas don't break down, they don't strand you, and unlike these, they don't require all kinds of reprogramming and stuff. It's just a design to get better gas mileage. It feels a little bit weird, but people still complain like mad. I didn't like that Toyota transmission. You know, I like the old 4-speed that didn't have all those problems, that was solid. Some of the complaints on these are warranted to the ones that actually broke down the road, and some of them aren't. But of course, when the law gets involved, as it did with Ford and these, they lost the suit, and their solution was they either have to fix the trannies if they're broken or buy the car back. And they said, well, they'd pay between $2,000 and $25,000 to buy the cars back, right? Well, every single customer of mine that had a high mileage one with the broken tranny, they said, hey, well, we don't want the car, buy it from us. They didn't offer them $25,000. They offered them $2,500, almost all of them. So when lawyers are involved, they certainly get their pay, but you as a consumer usually get screwed over because they didn't even have any kind of a chart that said this has to pay this much, this, that much. It was up to the dealer to pay whatever they want, and guess what? They're going to pay the lowest they possibly could. And I still haven't been able to find out what happened to the ones they did buy back. Like, did they ship them to Romania or something and sell them there? No one ever gave any information of what they actually did with the vehicles. Like when I was in Houston, they had the big Hurricane Harvey. There were old racetracks full of flooded out cars, and they were marked for parts sales only, not for resale. They were honest on that. But hey, if they sold hundreds of thousands of these things each year, what happens to the ones they buy back? I would love to know. If anybody out there knows, please email me, scottykilmer@gmail.com, and tell me, hey, here's what happens to these cars. If you work for Ford or you work for a place that buys them, tell me, because I'd love to know what happened to the ones they did actually buy back. I mean, did they just put them on their lots and sell them to other people? I don't know. I'd love to know. So in the case of this one, with the low mileage, it's a little bit odd. We'll show you when we take it for road test, but he's not having any particular problems with it. He gets good gas mileage. The only other complaint he's got is a very interesting sparkling paint job, but the clear coat is starting to come off over here, which I advised them to buff it all down really good and then wax the heck out of it, maybe put some ceramic coating on it. Do that a few times so that it won't bubble the clear coat. Some guys will re-clear coat them, but it's pretty hard to get an even coat. I mean, if you're good with one of those little touch-up airbrush kits, Some guys can do a little section. It'll look exactly the same because it is a clear coat. It's not the actual paint that's underneath the clear coat. But that's the only real complaint he has. You can see the body's still in good shape. So is the interior. So let's start her up. Starts right up. And you can see the interior. Hey, it's still clean. It's an economy car, but it's got room in the back seat. 4 doors. Real tiny backup camera, but nevertheless it has one. And for peace of mind, we'll go through a scan and see what kind of shape it's in. In this case, it's hiding behind this little cover. No one knows why, but they hid it there. Strange ideas people have. Plug it in, and we'll turn it on. Here we go. Let's see if there's any codes or anything. Charging good, 14.93. There's no trouble codes, okay? So, we'll go to live data. So, there's no trouble codes. Let's start looking at stuff. And I gotta say, this Autel scanner is pretty good. It shows you the value, then shows you the normal range it's supposed to be in. Long-term fuel trim, all right, minus 0.8. So it's subtracting a very tiny amount of fuel, so that is a very good reading. Airflow sensors right on, right around 2. Now you can see the fuel rail pressure is high. It's normal because this has a high pressure fuel system on it. One of the reasons it can get such good gas mileage. We're looking at all the onboard monitors, and as you can see, they are all okay. This thing is running perfectly. Keep going, they're all okay. If there was something wrong, the scan tool is good because you can find out what's wrong by looking at the monitor test. It's always doing the monitor test. It's got pretty good software, I gotta say. You can't argue that. They are complex vehicles where they're set up with these high pressure fuel systems, but at least the analytics, if you have a machine like this, are there so you can actually figure out what's wrong rather than just guessing. Now, before we take for a spin, these are international cars. The Ford Focus really was a European design, but this particular one was made in the United States, and you can tell that. A lot of stuff's hiding. It just says, you know, manufactured by Ford, but you look at the VIN number. It starts with a 1. 1 means it was made in the United States. Now for an economy car, he paid about 10 grand for this car used. You can feel the transmission jiggle. That's what people don't like, is they are kind of jiggly transmissions. They get great gas mileage, but there you can feel it there. It hunts between gears when it's trying to get the best gas mileage. Now, on the one hand, little car, corners quite well. And for a little car, it's not particularly noisy. I mean, I can hear the wheels and stuff because there isn't much insulation, but not that bad. But we'll take it to the little drag strip and see how the little engine works with this transmission. So you can feel the jiggle right there again. People just don't like it. There's that jiggle again. You can feel it jiggling. Like I say, it's not hurting anything, but it's a feel that a lot of people don't like. All right, here we come. Come to a little stop. We see there's nobody behind us. Wild kind of mirror setup. I like that. Here we go. Ooh, it spun the tires. Not really all that bad acceleration. It's relatively quick for a little car. That's one of the reasons they sell so well in Europe. The Europeans like the fancier version, souped up. They'll put turbos on them. They'll have a standard transmissions to have even better acceleration. But really, when you consider, you step on the gas, it accelerates. It's not a dog. The transmission does leave much to be desired in terms of shifting. Smoothness, yes, but it works and it gets, you know, he was getting 37 miles a gallon coming over here, so you can't argue that. It's actually kind of a fun little car to drive around. I mean, look, the guy only paid 10 grand for the thing. Got less than 50,000 miles when he bought it. All these tiny screens and stuff. Heck, you can always put an Android in. And being a small car, turns around real fast. We just turned around and headed back. And of course, if you baby it and don't accelerate it, the transmission is a lot smooth. When you really dump it, you can feel a little kind of slippage and stuff. But really, hey, for the gas mileage that it gets, it's not a race car. And they stopped selling them in the United States because Ford wants to make a lot of money selling trucks and SUVs. They still sell them in Europe, though. They say something like 2025 they're going to stop selling them because of Europeans' emissions. And they're going to electric cars, blah, blah, blah. But, hey, actually, they're not that bad of a car, other than if you're really hard on transmissions, you will wear these out faster, and hardly anybody knows how to fix it. That's a Ford, so it's got a little wind noise. He put one of these wind noise restrictors, which quieted some of it down, but I can still hear wind noise. And it's kind of fun driving around on these twisties. Oh, look. Whee! I'm not even slowing down here. It is a fun little car to drive around, I gotta say. It was European inspired, and they're more into handling than Americans are usually, and they're more into smaller cars too. They're still selling an awful lot of these in Europe. And really, You can get used to that transmission after driving it a while. It does kind of a motorboat overrun at times, but still works fine. Yeah, the transmission feels weird, but it works good enough. Pretty zippy, it handles quite well. Decent looking car. I like that weird paint job that it has on it. It's just that Ford's decided we're not in the car business anymore. We're going to sell trucks and SUVs, and we're going to sell electric cars. Hey, wishful thinking there. Let's see how that works out. Now, of course, you can't buy new ones. They don't sell them over here anymore. They still sell them in Europe, and the Europeans are kind of gaga on these things. On the other hand, if you look at it when it's got 150,000 miles, I probably wouldn't even go look at it. I'd say, that's too many mileage for those, unless they had proof that Ford had already replaced the transmission, because they have replaced a lot of transmissions in these things. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.